What if the biggest joke in modern political history was actually a warning that we all ignored? August 2019. It started with a notification on your phone. Donald Trump, the President of the United States, wanted to buy Greenland. Do you remember how people reacted? The media laughed. The late-night hosts had a field day. The Prime Minister of Denmark, Mette Frederiksen, called it absurd. It felt like a reality TV stunt gone wrong. A billionaire trying to buy a country like it was a hotel on Park Avenue. Most people looked at the headlines, chuckled, and scrolled past. They thought it was just another day in the circus. But while the world was laughing, the military strategists in Washington, Beijing, and Moscow weren't smiling. They were terrified. Because they knew something you didn't. Trump canceling his trip to Denmark wasn't a tantrum. It was a signal. It was the pulling of a tripwire. You see, that offer wasn't about real estate. It wasn't about putting a gold tower on an iceberg. It was an ultimatum. A final notice before the borders of the map are redrawn. Fast forward to today. The laughter has stopped. Right now, beneath the ice, a war is being fought. Not with guns, yet, but with lawyers, mining permits, and shadow investments. The United States has quietly reopened a consulate in Nuuk for the first time since the 1950s. China is calling itself a near-Arctic state. Russia is arming its northern fleet. The ultimatum has been delivered. And the clock has almost run out. We are about to witness the biggest geopolitical land grab since the Louisiana Purchase. And when the dust settles, the map of the world will not look the same. Most people think this story is about ice. It's not. It's about who gets to control the next 100 years of human history. Welcome to the battle for the top of the world. The unsinkable aircraft carrier. To understand why a frozen island with fewer people than a football stadium is suddenly the most important place on Earth, you have to look at a map. But not the map you learned in school. Take a look at the standard world map. Greenland sits up there at the top, big, white, and mostly useless, right? It looks isolated. Now, I want you to mentally rotate that map. Look at the world from the North Pole down. Suddenly, Greenland isn't isolated. It is the gatekeeper. In military terms, there is a concept called the GIUK Gap. It stands for Greenland, Iceland, United Kingdom. It is the only way for the Russian naval fleet to get from their Arctic bases into the Atlantic Ocean to threaten the American East Coast. If you control Greenland, you control the Atlantic. You can bottle up the Russian Navy like a cork in a wine bottle. This isn't a new idea. Let me take you back to 1946. The dust had just settled on World War II. The United States realized that the next war wouldn't be fought in the trenches of Europe. It would be fought in the sky, over the Arctic. So, Harry Truman, a Democrat, did something that sounds very familiar. He offered to buy Greenland from Denmark for $100 million in gold. Denmark said no, but they made a deal. They allowed the U.S. to build something secretly in the far north of the island. It's called the Thule Air Base. Imagine living in a place where the sun doesn't rise for months. A place so cold that engines freeze in seconds. That is Thule. It is the U.S. military's northernmost base. For decades, Thule was the eyes and ears of the West. It houses the massive radar systems that warn us if a nuclear missile has been launched over the North Pole. If that phone rings in the White House at 3 a.m. saying the world is ending, the call is coming from Greenland. But for the last 20 years, America got distracted. We were looking at the desert. We were fighting in the Middle East. We forgot about the ice. While we were looking away, the ice started to melt. And this is where the story shifts. Because as the ice melts, it's not just water that is being revealed. The ultimatum Trump gave wasn't just about military bases. It was about what happens when the ice is gone. The Arctic is warming 4 times faster than the rest of the planet. Routes that were impassable for all of human history are opening up. Ships can now sail from China to Europe over the top of Russia, cutting travel time by 40%. Greenland is no longer a wall of ice. It is becoming the Panama Canal of the 21st century. Whoever controls Greenland's ports controls the trade of the future. And right now, the United States is realizing that while we were renting space at Thule, someone else was trying to buy the landlord's house. The trillion-dollar treasure hunt. But trade routes are only half the story. The real reason the sharks are circling Greenland isn't about where ships can sail. It's about what is buried in the ground. Have you looked at your smartphone today? What about an electric car? A fighter jet? A wind turbine? None of these things work without a very specific group of materials. They are called rare earth elements. Neodymium, dysprosium, terbium. These names sound like science fiction, but your modern life depends on them. Without them, your iPhone is a brick. Without them, the U.S. military cannot build guidance systems for its missiles. Here is the scary part. For the last 30 years, the United States let one country corner the market on these minerals. China. China controls roughly 80% to 90% of the processing of rare earth elements. They have a chokehold on the global technology supply chain. If Beijing decided tomorrow to stop exporting these minerals, the American tech sector would collapse in weeks. The military would be paralyzed. This isn't a theory. In 2010, China briefly cut off exports to Japan during a dispute. It was a warning shot. The U.S. has been desperate to find a new source. They looked in Africa. They looked in South America. But the motherlode was hiding in plain sight. Geologists believe that Greenland holds the largest undeveloped deposits of rare earth metals on the planet. Specifically, a place called Kvanefjeld. Kvanefjeld is a mountain in southern Greenland. It is bleak, gray, and windy. But inside that rock is enough rare earth material to break China's monopoly forever. And guess who was the first to realize this? It wasn't the Americans. A few years ago, a company arrived in Greenland to develop this mine. On paper, it was an Australian company. But when intelligence agencies started looking at the money trail, they found something else. The largest shareholder was a Chinese state-backed conglomerate. China was about to buy the rights to the very resource that could break their control. They were going to own the alternative supply before it even came out of the ground. This is the context of the ultimatum. When Trump said, "Buy Greenland," the media heard, "real estate deal." The intelligence community heard, "resource security." The ultimatum was a message to Denmark and the local Greenlandic government. We cannot let China own this mountain. The U.S. stepped in. They blocked the deal. They put pressure on Copenhagen. They used soft power to make sure that the Chinese mine was put on indefinite hold. But this created a new problem. A problem that is tearing Greenland apart from the inside. Because the people of Greenland are poor. They rely on subsidies from Denmark to survive. They want independence. They want to be a free nation. And to be a free nation, they need money. China offered them money. The U.S. offered them protection. Now, the people of Greenland are standing at a crossroads. Do they take the cash from the East and risk becoming a vassal state? Or do they align with the West and hope the Americans actually care about them, not just the rocks under their feet? The Polar Silk Road. If you think this is just about a mine, you're thinking too small. The mine is just the bait. The trap is much bigger. To understand the full scope of the danger, we have to look at what China calls the Polar Silk Road. China has a plan. It is a plan that spans 50 years. They don't think in election cycles. They think in dynasties. Beijing describes itself as a near-Arctic state. Now look at a map again. China is 900 miles away from the Arctic Circle. That's like Mexico claiming it's a near-Canadian state. It makes no sense geographically, but it makes perfect sense strategically. China has been building a fleet of icebreakers, massive ships designed to smash through the frozen ocean. They are building more of them than the United States. In fact, for a long time, the U.S. only had one heavy icebreaker that actually worked. 1. China is building a fleet. Why? Because they see the future. They see the ice melting. They see the trade routes opening. And they want to build ports in Greenland to service these ships. A few years ago, China proposed building 3 massive airports in Greenland. The local government was thrilled. Finally, they thought, infrastructure, tourism, jobs. But Washington panicked. If China builds the airports, China controls the airports. And if China controls the airports, how long until Chinese military jets are landing on the flank of the North American continent? It was the Cuban Missile Crisis in slow motion. The Trump administration, and later the Biden administration, had to scramble. They had to pressure Denmark to kill the deal. They had to find the money to fund the airports themselves just to keep China out. It was a quiet victory, but it showed how close we came. This brings us back to the psychological warfare of the ultimatum. When the U.S. president spoke about buying the island, he stripped away the polite fiction of diplomacy. For decades, the West treated Greenland like a nature preserve. We ignored it. The ultimatum forced the world to admit the truth. Greenland is strategic terrain. And now, the pushback is starting. The U.S. has committed millions of dollars in aid to Greenland, not through Denmark, but directly to GIUK. We are trying to buy their loyalty. We are trying to prove that we are better partners than Beijing. But there is a third player in this game. One that doesn't use money or contracts. One that uses brute force. Russia. The bear at the door. While China is trying to buy Greenland with checkbooks, and America is trying to buy it with diplomacy, Russia is preparing for something much darker. Have you seen the satellite images of the Russian coastline lately? Russia has more Arctic coastline than anyone else. And Vladimir Putin has staked his legacy on controlling the north. They have refurbished dozens of Cold War military bases. They have deployed the S-400 missile systems to the Arctic. They are testing hypersonic missiles that can fly over the pole and strike anywhere in the northern hemisphere in minutes. Russia has planted a literal titanium flag on the seabed of the North Pole, claiming the ocean floor as Russian soil. They are militarizing the Arctic at a speed that has caught NATO off guard. And sitting right there, watching them, is Greenland. If a conflict breaks out between Russia and NATO, it will happen here. The waters between Greenland and Europe are the choke point. This is why the ultimatum matters so much right now. The U.S. military knows that Thule Air Base is vulnerable. They know that if Greenland declares independence from Denmark without a security guarantee, it becomes the easiest target on Earth. Imagine a newly independent Greenland. Population: 56,000. No army. No navy. Sitting on trillions of dollars of minerals, and the most strategic real estate in the world. It would be taken over in an afternoon. If not by invasion, then by a soft coup. A few well-placed bribes, a few private security contractors, and suddenly the Russian flag or the Chinese flag is flying over the Arctic. That is the nightmare scenario that keeps Pentagon planners awake at night. So what is the ultimatum, really? It's the hard truth that Greenland cannot be neutral. The days of being a quiet fishing community are over. The world has gotten too small, and the stakes have gotten too high. The United States has essentially drawn a line in the snow. We have signaled that Greenland falls under the American security umbrella, whether it is a territory or a sovereign nation. We are invoking the Monroe Doctrine of 1823, the idea that the Western Hemisphere is off-limits to foreign powers. Trump's offer to buy it was a crude way of saying, "This is ours, and we will not let it go." The final decision. So what happens next? What is about to happen now that the cards are on the table? We are moving toward a breaking point. In Greenland, there is an election cycle coming. There is a generation of young Greenlanders who want full independence from Denmark. They are tired of being a colony. They want to print their own passports. But the moment they do that, the financial aid from Denmark stops. That is the moment of maximum danger. That is the moment China is waiting for. To swoop in with a loan that looks like a lifeline but acts like a handcuff. And that is the moment the United States cannot allow to happen. We are seeing the pieces move right now. The U.S. is upgrading Thule. We are sending high-level delegations to GIUK. We are pushing for American mining companies to take the contracts instead of Chinese ones. We are in a race against time. The ultimatum has set a deadline. The U.S. must integrate Greenland into the North American economic and defense sphere before the Chinese checkbook or the Russian military gets there first. It is a silent annexation. We aren't buying the land with a single check. We are buying it piece by piece, influence by influence. Because if we don't, we lose the Arctic. And if we lose the Arctic, we lose the ability to project power across the Northern Hemisphere. Most people thought the story ended when the headlines faded in 2019. The truth is, that was just the opening shot. The real story is happening now. The negotiation didn't end, it just went underground. The U.S. government is currently preparing for a world where the Arctic is the central theater of conflict. The ultimatum stands. Greenland will align with the West, or it will become the battlefield of the East. There is no third option. The ice is melting. The wolves are gathering. And the silence at the top of the world is about to be broken. This battle for the Arctic is terrifying, but it's actually only one half of the pincer movement. While everyone is looking north, something even stranger is happening at the absolute bottom of the world. If you think the militarization of Greenland is shocking, you need to see what is happening in Antarctica right now. There are scientific bases that look a lot like military bunkers, and a treaty that is about to expire. I'll see you there.